All right, guys, let's go ahead and get to this TNA Impact reaction. Not, you know what? The show was good. I felt like it was, like I said earlier in the show, it felt like it was one of the best produced. Like whoever they used in San Antonio as far as the production crew, beautiful. I thought that they did an amazing job because they keep their same director and producer and their editors in Nashville and all that, like that. But I think when they go to these different towns, they use a different ground crew every time. They just contract somebody there. So whoever they had in San Antonio, I think they should just hire them full time to travel with them. They probably don't have the means to be able to do that, but I thought this show looked great. Audio, video, everything looked awesome. And I think it was Billy said the yellow ropes were back. Yeah, the yellow ropes were back. But other than that, I thought it was one of the best looking episodes they've done. Now, as far as the episode goes, not a ton of stuff to like there's nothing really on the show that I think everybody needs to go out of the way to watch. There were no, like the Texas Death Match I thought was pretty good. But other than that, like there's nothing really that anybody needs to go out of the way to watch. But they are starting to lay the groundwork for Bound for Glory. So as far as that goes, it's a newsworthy show. Now, I am not going to get into spoilers, okay? The Bound for Glory main event is already set. We're going to find out what that is next week. So I will get into a full rant about that, okay? And I do have some thoughts this week about the matchup between Kazarian and Joe Hendry next week, and I'll get to it in that segment. So I know some people are here for that. But if you want to know my thoughts on the whole situation, go back through Patreon. I did a full article earlier in the week about the Bound for Glory. It's a spoiler-riddled article, and it's got a ton of news about TNA, news that I didn't even get to today because I'm just running out of time. I had 2 missing points. And so go back and check out that article. It's for paid members only. I kept it behind the paywall because of the spoiler aspect to it. So, so for those of you that want to read ahead and figure out what's going on in the Bound for Glory main event and what my thoughts are and how they're getting there, go ahead and check that out. But the show opens up with Alicia coming down to the ring. So you hear her say, "Do you want to know something?" She's doing the Vicky Guerrero, and I think it's brilliant, by the way. Alicia Edwards is great. And 3 years ago, you would not have saw me, or I would not have been caught dead complimenting this woman because she was a baby face and she was a terrible actress. Like nothing she said came off as natural. Her backstage segments were cringe, like literal cringe, and her matches were never really good. I'm like, okay, you're only here because you're Eddie's wife. Now she's one of the best parts of the show. She's great. She was miscast all those years as a babyface. She is a natural heel. She is probably the most improved television performer that this company's had in a long, long time. To where, like, I look forward to seeing her on television now. Okay. I think she's fantastic. And I thought this was a fun way to open the show. So she says, "Do you want to know something?" And she gets nothing but boos. She's got a bedazzled neck brace on, which caught the attention of my wife. She goes, "Has she got a bedazzled neck brace on?" I was like, "Yeah." She's like, "Oh, she's an idiot." Yeah, you're right. That's the gimmick. And she starts laughing at her because she's funny. Alicia Edwards is funny. She's like a really good heel. Swig of coffee for Alicia. So she asks her question catchphrase once more and then complains about no longer being a TNA Knockouts Tag Team Champion due to Masha. Slamovich makes her way out after Eddie Edwards continues to verbally dress her down. And then she gets in Edwards' face, and Edwards chastises her to her face for being the weak link in their former militia duo. She says what's even worse is she doesn't even understand a word she's saying. And then we get the big reveal that Masha speaks perfect English, which is funny. Shout out to Andre. Andre's had like a conversation with her, and through whatever means. And he kind of like said, "Hey, one day you're gonna have that Kofi Kingston moment where like you have he had the Jamaican accent, and then all of a sudden he shows up on TV and he's just like, he's not from Jamaica. And he's just like speaking like his normal voice, and everybody like looks at him like, I thought you were Jamaican. He's like, oh no, my bad, I'm not. And so that's kind of what happened here. It's like, oh yeah, she speaks perfect English and without an accent, like all of a sudden. So shout out to Andre. But we get the big reveal from Slamovich, who informs Edwards that she's heard every word that's ever come out of her mouth. She says she's sick of her. As she continues to defiantly respond to her former partner, she's attacked from behind by Tasha. Masha versus Tasha coming up soon, I'm sure. Masha starts fighting back, but is taken out by Edwards' kendo stick, and Steels and Edwards join forces in beating down Slamovich until we hear the familiar sounds of the siren of the Juggernaut. Jordan Grace comes out to make the save, and she comes out. So does the system, Eddie Edwards and Brian Myers, and before anything can happen, out come the Hardy Boys, and boy, this crowd just came unglued for those dudes. They're so fucking over. Anybody that doesn't think that the Hardy Boys rule in TNA is flat out wrong. And TNA is using them to perfection, and they did so again here on this episode, and I'll tell you why in the main event. But yeah, they came out to a huge rock star reaction. You know, everybody's crediting the NXT relationship and the WWE relationship for the rise in ticket sales for TNA. And I think that is true. Because Joe Hendry was already getting popular before he went to NXT. So he was already rising at that point. But then he goes to NXT, and then he gets even more popular, and then that has carried over into TNA. Okay. However, the Hardy Boys have also contributed to the rise in ticket sales for this company. They are big contributors. They typically have the longest lines for merch afterwards and autographs and things like that. And right there it's Joe Hendry and it's the Hardys, the two most over acts in the company. The Hardy Boys have been big time contributors to the TNA's momentum swing. And I think that people are not talking about it, and they deserve a little bit of credit. Everybody only wants to credit NXT, and I think that partnership absolutely deserves some credit and probably more credit. But the return of the Hardy Boys very much plays a factor in TNA's ticket sales popularity. Okay. So I think we need to start adding them to it. The system bails out of the ring to the floor, and the two groups of wrestlers stare each other down. Santino's theme hits and says if they want to fight, they're going to get their wish tonight. Announces a 6-person tag with Eddie Edwards, Brian Myers, and Tasha Steelz taking on the Hardys and Masha. Santino, as for Jordan Grace, but before he could say anything, the NXT and TNA liaison, Ariana Grace, I think Jordan's cousin, and Santino's daughter, comes out, and she announced. So this is a weird thing with Santino and Ariana. That's Santino's daughter. They've acknowledged it on social media, but they have yet to acknowledge it on television. If they have, somebody correct me, but I have not heard them actually say, oh, this is Santino's daughter. Like, okay, like everybody knows, just say it. Maybe they're just trying to like avoid it because her name is Grace, and not Morella. But you know, a lot of people just like, they just say Grace is her middle name. What the hell? But she announces Wendy Chu and Rosemary versus Jordan Grace and one of Ariana's very best friends. So her gimmick is everybody from NXT is one of her very best friends. And I also have to say, listening to her talk is excruciating. I know it's supposed to be, but boy, like she's getting to where like we're talking about me wanting to change the channel now when she's on TV. Because the gimmick is so like way too over the top to where I'm like, okay, I'm kind of done with you. Like less is more with this lady. But so yeah, that's the biggest that's the big main event match, and I'll tell you why they did it. I'll explain why they did it and why it worked when we get to that point in the show. Then we go backstage, and Alexander, lost in thought, he's just like standing there in front of a metal door with blue and purple lights. The background kind of looks like my background here. Pretty funny. Or the lighting anyway. Eric Young confronts him, and he tells Alexander he's been in the same spot he's in right now. He says they think alike. He says he's got a lot of guys paying attention to his every word and every move. He said he's headed into a place where it's harder to come back from than he thinks. Young tells Alexander that he's the leader here and that it's time to start taking it serious. He walks off as Alexander seems to be giving that some serious thought. And then we go to First Class, AJ Francis and Casey Navarro, they get back on a winning their winning ways here. They defeated Sinner and Saint. Sinner and Saint returns. They've been gone for a little bit. I don't know why. I don't know if it was just like they were hurt or they had conflicting engagements, but they're back now. Same with Leon Slater. Leon Slater's back. So we were all excited when Sinner and Saint and Leon Slater signed here, and then they were around for a little bit, and then they just took off. But now they're back. So we'll see. It looks like I think Sinner and Saint, even though they lost here in convincing fashion, we'll see later in the show they might be getting a little bit of a push. I thought the match was good. I'm not a big fan of Casey Navarro as the tag team partner, so I'm hoping that Rich Swann takes back over when he gets back. Rich Swann, shout out, brother. You look good. Happy for you. That doesn't mean Casey's not a good wrestler. He is, but I think I just like Swann and Francis as the act better. But they got the victory here. Francis hit a down payment choke slam, and then Navarro immediately followed up with a top rope splash for the pinfall victory. Santana's backstage. He cuts a hell of a promo. This guy's so good. What a fucking signing by TNA. Whatever money they're paying him is not enough. He's that good. And I hope they're paying him a lot. So he's really great. He says tonight we're going to find out if JDC is willing to walk through the fire because he's going to baptize him in his own blood. That was a little bit of foreshadowing. He was right about that. Because you motherfuckers, y'all locked in this world with me. And after this, yeah, what a hell of a promo. This guy's so good. He's a very compelling TV character. Very top heavy on the main event scene, and I think that's a good thing. But if Joe Hendry wasn't so popular, you would want Mike Santana to be the world champion, to be honest with you. Which is why they need that secondary title. They need their U.S. title, Intercontinental title, which is why they need to make the International Heavyweight Championship a thing, but they're fucking around with PCO. Speedball Mike Bailey is standing by with GM Miller backstage, and he goes on to cut a terrible promo. This guy, less is more with him. He's such BQ calls him cheeseball Mike Bailey, and that is correct. He is a cheeseball. So good in the ring, but boy, oh boy, is he not entertaining when he's cutting a promo. Talks about recapturing the title, and he's prepared to defend it against the best of the best. That was a good movie. Miller informs Bailey that speaking of the best, Morella has made a match with Bailey will be teaming up with Leon Slater and Kushida to take on Zach Wentz and the ABC duo of Chris Bay and Ace Austin in 6-man action next week. So there you go. This should be a good old X Division showcase match. Rhino then defeats Mid Cardona via DQ. I don't think Mid Cardona is ready to wrestle, so he has not done anything. So he did a couple moves in this match. They kept it short and sweet, but Cardona ends up getting himself disqualified. So not much, not really like that great of a segment, to be honest with you. But so let's see. Cardona notices. He avoids Rhino. Rhino heads out after him to the ground, hits a big suplex to Cardona on the unforgiving entrance ramp. Fans break out in an ECW chants. Rhino heads out under the ring, pulls out a chair, he brings it into the ring, but Cardona gets it and hits him with it. So there you go. And the referee calls for the bell. After the match, Cardona continues to beat down Rhino with a chair until the lights in the Impact Zone go out. And when they come back on, PCO is standing in the middle of the ring behind Cardona. He slaps his hand on Cardona's throat to hit a choke slam. He climbs up for the PCO assault, but Cardona exits the ring to avoid it. PCO taps into his inner Ric Flair and starts beating up an inanimate object. So yeah, he beats up the chair, heads to the top rope, and does a PCO assault on the chair. And then Cardona was like, "This guy's crazy." We need to get this match over with. I think we're not getting it until Bound for Glory, but we need to get these belts off PCO and turn them into real title belts. Spitfire defeats Kendall Gray and Carly Bright to retain the TNA Knockouts Tag Team Championships. These are two girls from NXT. This is the first time I'm ever seeing them. I thought they were good. I thought this match was okay. Not like a great match, but this was very much like, hey, we're trying to teach these kids how to wrestle, and they're in with two pretty good wrestlers, so that worked out. And I thought they were impressive. And I think, as more time goes on, they, and they get more matches under their belts, they'll probably end up being pretty good. So, yeah, but it was, again, we got two NXT folks coming here. So there you go. And then we get to the backstage, and we see Ash by Elegance bragging about her looks in a mirror, and George Iceman is blowing smoke up her ass, bragging about her some more. And then Heather Reckless walks in, and she says she wants to take them up on their offer. She tells them that she has a match next week against Xia Brookside, and asks if they'll watch it. So they're very much like talking down to her. Reckless walks off, and so they tell her they'll think about giving her the makeover. They walk off. Ash and Iceman get back to talking about her looks, and the segment wraps up. That was another excruciating segment. So it was, oh boy, that was a tough watch. Now we get to the Texas Death Match, and before we get to that, let's go to the chat here. What are you guys thinking of the show so far? Billy says, I thought Santino acknowledged it, but maybe that was YouTube. I don't think it's been acknowledged on television that Santino is her dad. And I don't see any reason why they won't acknowledge it. Makes no sense to me. And yeah, and Io says her gimmick is she has a lot of best friends. PCO and Cardona are in pick your poison matches. Yeah, so they're definitely a BFG match. So yeah, the pick your poison is coming up, and it looks like Steph DeLander choosing on behalf of PCO. So this is coming up in Spartanburg for the taping. So coming up in the taping, the long-awaited match that you guys have all been wanting to see from WWE Main Event. This was a WWE Main Event match several times. Nick Nemeth versus Matt Cardona coming up in Spartanburg. So there you go. So if you're heading to Spartanburg and you're amped up, that's one of your matches that you're going to get. Okay, so let's get to the Texas Death Match. I thought this was a pretty good match. I don't think this is a match that everybody needs to go out of the way to watch, but I thought it was pretty good, and I thought it was effective. And I got to say about Johnny Dango Curtis, I've been tough on this guy for a long time because I've always thought he was kind of a geek. And he never really took himself seriously. I thought he performed pretty well in this match. The guy spilled a ton of blood. So I think I'm done for the time being picking on the guy. So kudos to him. This is the best match I've ever seen him in. I don't think this was like a blowaway match. They didn't really do much. And I was unhappy with the fact that on the TNA Plus version, they cut out several minutes of the match because I'm like, I think things happened during those several minutes that we missed because they were in the ring and then all of a sudden they're over it by the stage area. And then I felt like they were by the stage area for a bit too long. Like it felt like it dragged at that point because they were trying to set up this table spot. And they had these two guys. So they have the stage, right? And then beneath the stage, they have these two guys sitting in front of the two tables, right? There actually might have been three. And there was like a blanket over it or a sheet over the tables. And while the fighting is going on around them, they're sitting there. One guy is just taking notes and another guy's playing on his computer. And they're not paying attention to the action. And I was like, clearly this is a plan. So, and these guys are bleeding like shit at this point because Santana took a trash can to the head, and I think he was like inside the trash can, and then Dango did his top rope leg drop onto the trash can, and then Santana used the barbed wire baseball bat on Dango, and so both guys are bleeding like crazy. And so then they're at the staging area, and I just felt like at the staging area, it just took so long to get to what they were trying to do. And that was my problem with the match. Now, this still was not a bad, I thought this was a pretty good match, but that was like kind of my problem with the match. They didn't do a whole lot, which is fine. They brawled over to that area, and then they took a lot of time to get to the ultimate destination spot that they wanted. To where Dango is on those tables where those guys were just chilling at, and Santana comes off the ladder from the stage, like he puts the ladder on the stage, climbs up the ladder, and then does a splash, and then gets a 1, 2, 3, and then followed by a 10 count for the victory. What I did like about it is that they didn't do a 2.9 fest, right? Or they didn't do a 9 count fest, which you see in these Texas death matches. They worked up to a spot, hit the spot, and then the match was over. You don't really see that a whole lot these days. And I think if he was going up against anybody other than Dango, they would have done that. They would have kept the guy a bit stronger. But because it was Dango, he's like, they didn't have him kick out, which I think every other like main event talent on the roster would have kicked out at that point. Or if they didn't kick out, they definitely would have gotten up from a splash through a table. They definitely would have gotten up. But that being said, my criticisms of the match, I still thought this was a pretty good match. And I think Santana is such a star. He is so great. The crowd loves him. You got lots of Santana chants. Like you got Joe Hendry is the most popular. And then you got Hardys. I don't want to say Hardys are behind him. I think the Hardys are like equal to Joe Hendry right now. Based on like crowd reactions. I think they're equal. And then right behind the Hardys is Santana. He has done a really great job, and TNA has done a good job of booking him. It's just unfortunate for him that Joe Hendry is so like he's not even in close to popularity with Joe Hendry, and he's still very popular. But Hendry is just insanely popular right now. So you got to go with Hendry. So they need to hurry up and get a damn secondary championship. But this thing was a bloodbath. It was a wild bloodbath. And after the match was over, Santana was celebrating. He's attacked by Moose, and Moose beats him down with a chair and leaves him laying. So that looks like that's going to be the match for Bound for Glory, Santana versus Moose. We need to get one of those title belts on the line there, and I think that would add to that feud. The walking locker room leader, Josh Alexander, shown backstage catching up with Sinner and Saint. He explains to them that the competition level for guys like them is at a whole new standard when you enter promotion like TNA. He tells them to keep their heads up and keep trying. So it looks like we're going to get a faction here. Josh Alexander and Sinner and Saint. I'm kind of worried about what they're going to do with Josh now that he has been kind of jobbed out quite a bit. He needs to get some type of momentum back to a win streak. And so it looks like they're going to do something here with Sinner and Saint. And probably do something with Derek Young and then maybe even Steve Macklin. We'll see. Yeah, if they're going to do a faction with Josh Alexander and Sinner and saying like, okay, I'm kind of with that. Let's see where it goes. Lei Ying Lee coming to TNA. So they have changed her name. She was Zia Lee, but we already got Zia Brookside, so they changed that name because she was then Zia Zhao was what she was using on the Indies. But now she can be Lei Ying Lee. But I thought this video was cool. The guys producing the video, I thought they did a great job. Like she looks like a super interesting character. So kudos to them. Good job for that. I'm interested to see where they go. She does debut at these tapings, and she is probably going to be. Yeah, she can be on the show next week. So she's probably going to be crushing some J-Brones for a little bit, and then ultimately get her to a title shot. That's kind of what they do here. Joe Hendry, Frankie Kazarian, and Nick Nemeth. Okay, so Joe Hendry walks out. He looks like he just rolled out of bed. Like his hair's not fixed. Like it's just kind of like wetted down and pushed over a little bit. And I was just like, Joe. And he and then the crowd's going apeshit for the guy. But I was like, if you turn the volume down, you just like watch him walk out. He literally looks like he just rolled out of bed. It's just like, what's going on with this guy? But he says that he compliments the fans, talks about his victory at TNA Victory Road, which that was another really good match. Josh Alexander and Joe Hendry. I enjoyed that match. Hendry says every time he's down, the fans lift him back up. He has a feeling that they're going to lift him all the way up to the TNA World Championship. And then when he says that, the king of TNA, Frankie Kazarian, comes out. And Kazarian says it's funny that he thinks that the fans will lift him up to the TNA World Championship when all of the fans in the crowd tonight, for example, can't lift up their guts to see their own genitals, which I thought that was a pretty funny line. He says it's also funny Hendry thinks that he's next in line for a title shot after winning one match. He says he only won one match in the first place because he had a weapon in his crotch, and that's not the first time he said his crotch loaded. He calls Hendry a cross between Shrek and groundskeeper Willie from The Simpsons. That was a pretty good line. He says if anyone deserves a shot at the TNA World Championship, it's Frankie, because I believe in Frankie Kazarian, and the fans go crazy. You suck, you suck, you suck. And Kazarian demands Nick Nemeth come out. Okay. Here's my problem with this. So it looks like they're finally going to pay off the Frankie defeating Joe Hendry at Against All Odds in Chicago. And they're going to finally pay off Frankie eliminating Joe Hendry in less than a minute on his NXT debut. They're finally getting to it. Here's the problem with it. At what point did Frankie mention any of that stuff? So, like, Frankie's got a gripe here. Why is Joe Hendry proclaiming that he is the number one contender, that he deserves a TNA championship shot? Because Frankie beat Joe. That's the angle. That's the storyline. They're not doing it. That's the only way it makes sense. Frankie has a gripe. Frankie has a point. If he says that, he did not make that point. And nor did Tom Hannafin or Matthew Raywalt on commentary make that point. They fucked the story up. That's the angle. That's the story, and they didn't get to it. They didn't connect the dots there. Now, I know you guys understand what the story is. I understand what the story is. But they still need to connect the dots. They haven't connected the dots. Joe Hendry has shown no anger towards that situation whatsoever. He has not vowed to get any type of revenge on Frankie Kazarian. He just moved on, and so did Frankie. Now they're circling back to it. So, okay, now we got to re-educate the audience about what happened, because guess what? A lot of things have happened since June. Okay? Joe Hendry's been in multiple feuds since June, right? He had the feud with Josh Alexander. He had the feud with Gallus. He had the feud with Ethan Page. Okay? He has not mentioned Frankie's name since then. And Frankie moved on because Frankie beat him. So they're finally getting back to it, and then they don't mention it. That is a total fail. That is a total miss. And I was hoping, so when I wrote my column and I mentioned this earlier in the week about this setup here, I was like, yeah, okay, look, they're finally getting back to it. They got to mention it. They didn't mention it. They dropped the ball. They dropped it. Now, are they still going to get to the destination they want to get to? Yes. But they're missing steps along the way. This is basic storytelling 101. They're doing the matchmaking completely makes sense for them to like, it's like, okay, yeah, they're finally paying this thing off, but they don't even talk about it. Now, do they have time to talk about it? Yes, they do, but they should have beat us over the head with the fact that Frankie's like, whoa, motherfucker. I beat you in June. And it's like, and other than the champion, nobody has touched me. And that was in a multiple person gimmick match. I got pinned in that. You literally only win one match and you want the championship. I beat you in June. I'm the one that deserves the title shot. And then to make the match, it makes sense there because Joe Hendry defeated Moose and he defeated Josh Alexander. He, rectified that loss that he had at Slammiversary to Josh. Right. So like, yeah, it makes sense that Joe and Frankie would be both top contenders for the title. They have to compete now because Frankie owns a win over Joe Hendry. But Frankie doesn't deserve his title shot yet because Nick Nemeth already pinned him. So yeah, we got to get there. The matchmaking makes sense. The problem is they have not appropriately connected the dots to get to the point. They're almost there. they're almost there. They're getting so close. They're getting so close to doing it right, and then they just don't do it. So, and this is obviously going to be on YouTube, and I'll hopefully make this a reel too. We gotta tell them, like, guys, you're missing something here. You're missing something. Frankie has to tell the story of Against All Odds. Tom Hannafin has to tell the story. We need a video package. We got to beat everybody over the head with the fact that Frankie screwed Joe in June and owns a victory over him. That's why we're doing this. But they didn't say it. So anyway, Nemeth comes out. And he said something and I think, and I would say that this will come up, later, but Frankie looked at Joe and said, "You're doing good, kid." That's a very demeaning way to talk to a grown man that's like 35. So it's like, so now he comes out, "You're doing good, kid. We're all counting on you." That is a very demeaning way to talk to somebody and talk down to them, especially when you're an alpha. I hope that comes up later, if we, no spoilers here, but if we do, get to Nemeth versus Joe Hendry down the road, I hope that comes back up, but I don't have any faith. I think the wrestlers know what they're doing. I don't think the production and the writing crew know what they're doing. But yeah, we get to Morella announcing that it'll be Joe Hendry versus Frankie Kazarian next week on iMPACT. And the winner will move on to challenge Nick Nemeth for the TNA World Championship in the main event of the biggest show of the year, TNA Bound for Glory 2024 in Detroit, Michigan. Shout out to Dobby the Brain Heenan. All of the tickets, the tickets that you're able to count, right? Of the tickets that they're able to count for Bound for Glory, it's like 85% sold out. I think once we finally figure out what the card is, which I think I could probably tell you off the top of my head, I know 4 matches off the top of my head that are absolutely happening, and I could probably tell you a 5th match that I think should happen. But you can't really trust TNA sometimes. So, but I think the direction right now is very clear where they're going for Bound for Glory, and that is a good thing. That is a good thing. And I'll talk more about it next week. Let's go to the main event. The main event, and I'm going to tell you guys, TNA did something very smart. And so I criticize them often, but I also compliment them at the same time. Okay. What they did in this main event was genius. And I'll tell you why. This main event was not about the Hardys in the system. This entire main event was about Masha. They built it up from the beginning of the show. They flipped Masha babyface. And by the end of the show, Masha is your number 2 babyface in the Knockouts division in the entire company. Because they're very clearly building towards Masha and Jordynne Grace. You could see it coming. At one point, Jordynne Grace and Masha were backstage. I think I skipped a part, but Jordynne was like, I kept having those open challenges and I was hoping you would accept and you never came through. And Masha's like, well, maybe we'll have to do that. That's your match for Bound for Glory. We know Jordynne Grace is leaving, and we've been questioning it for weeks. Who is going to be that person to step up and take Jordynne's place? And time again, everybody said Masha, Masha, Masha. And I was like, I don't think Masha has the charisma to fill those shoes. I think Masha's better like bell to bell in the ropes. I think she's better. But we'll see what she's made of. Well, tonight, they had her in there with the Hardys and the system and Tasha Steelz, and I felt like she was the best wrestler in the match. I just like her explosiveness, her athleticism, the way she's coming off them ropes and hitting people and everything that she was doing, her intensity, and the way she was pandering to the crowd and smiling like a babyface. This whole match was designed to get Masha over as a babyface. Now they're still setting up Hardys versus the system, and I think that's match number 5, right? I think that's what we're getting. I don't like the system getting beat by the Hardys so much because they beat them last week on the show, and then the system wins the titles, and then they lose again this week. It's like you're making the titles look weak. So I would have had Masha get the pin here over Tasha. I think that's where I would have went, but I think they're trying to set up a singles match between the two. So it's like, okay, you maybe don't want to give away Masha pinning her so quickly because I think it's maybe during the Spartanburg tapings they'll do the match to set up for Masha versus Jordynne. But yeah, I thought the match was really good. Look, the Hardy Boys don't do anything but their greatest hits. And they're one of the most over acts in the company, them and Hendry. And I think Eddie Edwards and Brian Myers are a great tag team. I think they're a very underrated tag team. I don't think they get enough credit. But even then, there were 6 people in this match, and I thought the person that stood out the most was Masha Slamovich. So now I feel much better about her being the person to take over for Jordynne as she leaves. Okay. So let's go to the end here, and then we're gonna send this thing home. We see the system enjoy an offensive lead for another minute or two, and then the Hardys help shift the momentum back in their team's favor. Fans pump up Matt Hardy with delete chants, and before he can go for his finisher, Alicia Edwards gets involved at ringside. The referee ejects her, and the crowd pops. She makes a big issue out of leaving. Hands on the hips, the whole deal. And out of nowhere comes ABC, Chris Bay, and Ace Austin. And they actually carry her to the back, and she is screaming and kicking. She is so good at her job. I'll be honest, if you don't think that she's good at her job, I don't want you to listen to this show anymore. Because we ain't the same, son. Steelz attacks Slamovich from behind. Masha hits a turning splash to the ropes on the Steelz onto the floor. Jeff Hardy hits a twist of fate on Edwards. Matt Hardy hits one on Myers, and Jeff hits a swanton bomb off the top rope. Matt goes for the cover. 1, 2, 3. The Hardys and Masha Slamovich pick up a win in a fun main event. Yeah. I thought this was a fun main event. I thought this was a mostly pretty fun show. Good episode. Again, not anything anybody needs to go out of the way to go check out. So if you're just like a match guy, there wasn't a single match on this show that's like that everybody's going to be talking about. But I thought the show was good, and it's what it was designed to do is set the table for Bound for Glory, and they did that. I can tell you right now 5 matches for Bound for Glory. And that's all we need announced, and everything else can just be fucking gimmicks, But we have the top 5 matches I feel like are pretty strong as far as ticket sales and pay-per-view. I think that's going to do pretty good. Next week on Impact, we got Rosemary and her tag team partner, the one and only Rock and Roll Spooky Chew, coming up next week. So Rock and Roll Spooky Chew coming up next week. Will we get the return of Rock and Roll Spooky Chew theme song on the show? Probably. We'll take on Jordan Grace and an NXT mystery partner. Jonathan Gresham defeats Laredo Kid. Sorry, that was a spoiler, my bad. But as soon as I saw the match announced, we all knew who was winning that one. Zach Winston, ABC versus Kushida, Leon Slater, and Mike Bailey. Frankie the Future Kazarian and Joe Hendry for the TNA title eliminator match. And Lei Ying Lee debuts. So next week's show is pretty freaking loaded. Should be a great episode. All right, guys. Let's see. Hold on. I'll go to the chat. Let's go to the chat here. I'm trying to get back to. All right. So full match on YouTube now, I think. Okay, so the JDC death match with Santana's on YouTube. Billy says JDC worked really hard in the match. He did. Look, I thought it was a good match. I did. Not a great match, but I thought it was a good match. It was a very basic death match. Big 2025 coming in for Santana. Yep. And then let's see. I slowly get Red Dragon, Fish, and O'Reilly vibes when I think of Sinner and Saint. I could see that. But we have not seen them do anything. We need to see them actually have good matches. She hasn't done anything. All right. When are we going to revisit Josh beating Kaz to be the number 1 contender? They totally dropped that, and it did happen. I think there's some truthers out there that saying it didn't happen, but that did happen. Okay. Io saying maybe Tom will bring it up next week. He's talking about Kazarian. And the issue with Kazarian not talking about beating Joe Hendry in June. Yeah, maybe. I don't have any faith. Tonight, this past Thursday would have been the time to do that. You hit him over the head with it right away. Not a good job. Kazarian also hasn't been pinned since Slammiversary. That is true. I think he beat Kushida. So on the pre-show victory road, I think that's what. So congratulations. As far as ticket sales, Detroit might top San Antonio. I think that it will. I think they're gonna be like 2,500 deep for real. So good stuff. Let's see. Lucha says Masha is active as fuck on the indies, so that can help from an exposure standpoint. Yep. Let's see. Io says, I think we're getting ABC versus System versus the Hardys. I think that could be the case too. Because I think we should only get the System versus the Hardys. I think that should be the match, but they're going to want to get ABC involved in there. And I'll be honest, it would not shock me to see one more team added to that, because that's kind of what they like to do in the tag team division. So I think that's probably what they'll end up doing. Luke says, I can see it now, 2025. Jordan Grace is beefing with Roxanne Perez, and she's in a 2-on-1 situation, and Masha comes out. Huge pop. That could happen. First Class 2, maybe the brag if we didn't injure Chris Bay, System would win. First Class taking a lot of L's. I don't think they're going to be in that match. They shouldn't, but I could see them doing that. They got to kick the tires on Rich and KC as tag team for First Class. I like Swan. I like Swan and AJ. That's my team there. Lish says Lish is and always has been the shit outside the ring. I don't think she's been good outside the ring until she's been a heel. I think that's what it is. All right, guys. Well, that's going to do it for me this week. I greatly appreciate you being here. This has been fun. Everybody go to patreon.com/the Mike and JD show if you want to be a part of the show. It's always a good time live. And you also get this show. If you're only an audio person, you get the show in your podcast feed on Spotify or on Patreon app. And you get it right to your, like, immediately as soon as it's over. So you don't have to wait until next week to catch the impact reaction. You get it right on Saturday morning. So if you can't watch it with me live, it's right in your feed as soon as you want it. And then, of course, this video, if you're a YouTube guy, you get the whole video on Patreon immediately. So now you get to watch live. It's just there. You get access to it. And I don't make these available for everybody anymore. So you can only get it as a paid member of the Patreon. So come join the Patreon community. That way you get access to all my articles, the Mike and JD show, early and ad free, whatever JD's got going on, his short stories and things like that, and whatever else he's doing. And then, of course, Brace for Impact, and then our overtime series that we like to do. So tons of stuff. All right, guys, that is going to do it for me this week. And until next week, mahalo.